Welcome to this episode of This Week in Hockey East. I'm Bridgette Proulx here with Gallanty. We have a lot of important non-conference games to dive into this weekend for both the men and the women, and we'll be joined by Northeastern defenseman Jules Constantinople later on in the show. But first, let's talk about our quadruple header of Nesn games on Friday. 4 Hockey East games on Nesn, broadcasting starting at 1 p.m. with the BC men hosting Notre Dame at Connie Forum.
Yeah, what more could you want for Thanksgiving than 4 college hockey games in a row on Friday? It's going to be so much fun. We've talked a lot about Boston College, the way the schedule's fallen. They've been on Nesn a bunch here the last couple of weeks. So just a couple of key points to get to here as the Eagles take on Notre Dame in what is just as we teased last week. This is a gigantic weekend because of how important the non-conference schedule is on both the men's side and the women's side in terms of the NPI. We'll explain the why a little bit later, but talking about the games to start with, BC split in what I thought was a really good series, felt like a playoff caliber series against Maine over the weekend. They win 7-3 on Friday. They drop Saturday's game 3-0. But even with that loss, BC's won 5 of their last 6 games since the start of November. They still are averaging more than 4 goals a game in that stretch, even after getting shut out by Mattis Russo, who was awesome for Maine on Saturday. And even Saturday, they were still at about 3.6 expected goals, despite just 21 shots. So they're still generating. And Greg Brown actually said he thought there were moments they played better Saturday than Friday, but just a couple of breakdowns that Maine took advantage of. But, they're still playing okay, and they're really one of the hottest teams in Hockey East right now. We've talked a lot of different players, Bridgette, but different guys keep stepping up for BC.
Yeah, one guy we should talk about this week is Ryan Conmey. He's our Service Credit Union scoring leader. He had 4 goals and 7 points in his last 4 games, including 2 goals and an assist on Friday night. He's a guy who early in the season had that success on the power play, and now it's starting to come 5-on-5 as well. And Greg Brown says Conmey has gotten more comfortable playing in the system now after transferring from UNH in the offseason. And Eric, let's see if BC can keep it going offensively against Notre Dame in what's a crucial weekend.
Yeah, this is one of those things that makes college hockey a little bit different than some of the other college sports, right? Because in some of the other sports, when there's subjectivity, you can afford a loss somewhere along the way that kind of gets factored out in terms of the human element. But because everything is a math problem in college hockey, right? And everything is completely objective, this is the type of game you cannot lose, right? Because Notre Dame has not gotten off to a good start. They're 3-8-1 coming into the week. They've played about the hardest schedule I've ever seen. I mean, it's just, you look at this. Since the start of November, Notre Dame has played number 2 Michigan, at Minnesota, number 1 Michigan State. Then they have this Hockey East weekend. After this, number 2 Wisconsin. Then they open the second half with number 7 Western Michigan, number 1 Michigan, and number 9 Penn State. It's completely insane. And they might actually be better than their record. But their record is what it is. So when you're at home and you're facing a team with a poor record in the non-conference, you cannot lose this game. There's not enough time to make up unless you basically win as many games as you possibly can. So this is one of those sneaky games that's so important in the course of a whole season, even though it doesn't necessarily jump off the page in terms of Notre Dame's record. But it is a rivalry game, and that always factors in. You mentioned that we're going to have a women's game as part of this Nesn quadruple header, right? Penn State, Northeastern. We'll talk about that in a second with Jules. Then after that, it's Vermont taking on the number 1 team in the NPI right now, the Dartmouth Big Green. This could be a massive help to a lot of teams in the country if Vermont on Friday or Merrimack on Saturday, who's going to play Dartmouth, could get a victory or get some kind of result here against the Big Green. Their record is perfect. They're 6-0. Remember, they got off to a really good start last year under Reed Cashman, and Bridgette, they're doing it again.
Yeah, Dartmouth so far averaging 4.3 goals per game, allowing just 1.2 goals per game. They have 1 win over a ranked team. That's a 2-1 win over number 17 Cornell earlier in the season. And Big Green goalies have been good so far this year. Emmett Croto and Rowan Clark have split time in net. They both have 3 wins. They both have great goals against average and save percentage numbers. Croto with just outstanding numbers, a 1.00 goals against average, 960 save percentage. Clark right behind him with a 1.33 goals against average, 923 save percentage heading into the weekend, and that's been a factor for why they've stayed undefeated so far.
And it'll make the challenge really hard for Vermont as they try to find their offense. They're averaging under 2 goals a game so far this year. I think they've actually played okay on the back end. I know some of the results don't seem that way, but they've gotten pretty good goaltending, especially from the eye test. They had that very impressive win over Maine a couple of Saturdays ago. They've scored first in their last 2 games. So if they can find a way to get their offense going, there might be some potential here because there's some good stuff to see on the back end, but it'll be a question, can they do that against a really good Dartmouth team? So that's an interesting matchup for Vermont coming off the game against Harvard. And then following that at night, maybe the most important matchup because Providence has a real opportunity, Bridgette, going out to Colorado College for 2 games this weekend. There's not that many games left for Hockey's teams against the NCHC. This is 2 of them for Providence. The biggest thing for the Friars, Roger McQueen is starting to trend the way we all expected him to when he announced he was coming to Providence this season.
Yeah, McQueen being that top 10 draft pick, you expect him to have a great freshman season. And he got off to a little bit of a slow start in terms of the numbers, in terms of the goal numbers, but he really has been involved in the offense a lot from the jump. And you're starting to see it all come to fruition for him. He's got 4 goals in the last 4 games. He has 37 shots in the last 6 games. Nate Lehman said he was always generating the most on our team, but he just hadn't scored yet. So it was only a matter of time, and now the goals are coming too. And he's really firing off shots, winning a lot of face-offs. He's got good size, and that's what's been making him effective over the last few weeks.
Yeah, he's been really good on the faceoff. And if you try to think of what can you do to quantify that? Like, if we take a number like game score, which I know is a little bit in the weeds, but it basically just like adds all the things together that you're talking about, not just scoring and put it in one number. Ryan Sykes does a really good job. He put this note out on Twitter. McQueen actually has the second highest average game score of any player in Hockey East this year. So that basically backs up what Nate Lehman said, that he's been maybe Providence's best player. The question was, were the goals going to come, Bridgette? And now they have in a big way. And we'll see if they can continue that against Colorado College, a good NCHC team that we already saw split against UConn earlier this year. They're 7-6 right now. They got a win over Duluth last weekend. So a lot of really big games, but an even bigger one on the women's side coming up. Penn State Northeastern. This should be fantastic and a great measuring stick. We're going to talk with Jules Constantinople next on This Week in Hockey East.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. It's time to check in on some of the big women's matchups this week, including our Nesn game between number 4 Penn State and number 7 Northeastern. That's a 3:30 puck drop here on Friday. And Eric, these are 2 teams that have dominated their conference games so far this season.
Yeah, it's really been amazing. Northeastern, as we said, unbeaten. Penn State unbeaten overall, which makes this a lot of fun. I think why has Northeastern been so good? We should dive into a couple of reasons for that. The first big thing is their special teams have been fantastic. They have the best power play in hockey so far this year at 25%. They have the best penalty kill in hockey this year at over 95%. What leads to a good penalty kill most of the time? Really good goaltenders. And once again, Northeastern has that, right? They've played both goaltenders here a little bit recently. We know how good Lisa Janssen was the end of last year. She has a 925 save percentage, leads Hockey East with a 150 goals against average this year. And then we've seen a bit more of Renna Trembecki here recently. Had 30 saves over the weekend in the game she played against Maine, up to a 939 for the year. 230 save games already this season. She's been great so far. So they have that goaltending once again.
Yeah, 2 good goalies can never really hurt you. Dave Flint knows that very well. And some key players producing are another reason why this team has been doing so well so far. And we just talked to Jules Constantinople. She leads all Hockey East defensemen with 4 goals, 12 assists, and 16 points. She also leads all defensemen in power play goals with 4 in the whole conference. And you look at some of the freshmen that have been able to get involved so far this season for Northeastern as well. Freshman striker Zablocki with 16 points in just 14 games. And the captain, Lily Shannon, is our Jersey Mike's a sub above Women's Player of the Week. She had 4 goals last weekend against Maine. She leads Hockey East in goals. She's got 10 goals, 13 assists, and 23 points. She has the highest point per game pace in the conference. She's 1.64 points per game. Also top 5 in total face-off wins for Northeastern as their top center.
Yeah, on the other side for Penn State, as you mentioned, unbeaten so far. Just absolutely rolling. Same similar stuff, right? Power play's been really good. They've scored 16 times in their last 10 games. When we think of the Penn State men, we're thinking of Gavin McKenna. When we're thinking the women, we're thinking of Tessa Janicki. She's been absolutely awesome and fun to watch so far this year, Bridgette.
Yeah, her head coach Jeff Campersall called her a generational talent. Actually, compared her to Alina Mueller, who was that for Northeastern, and said that she's a master in the face-off circle. She also blocks a lot of shots, and she leads Penn State with 25 points in 14 games played.
Hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. For Bridgette, I'm Eric. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll talk next week.